All right, so now I want to just talk about the final exam a little bit. Oh, I don't have it pulled up. Thought I did. Let me see. Don't go away. All right, so this is the document I have available under the final exam. One of the things to allay perhaps some anxiety, I don't want to allay too much anxiety, and and then have people not study. So, so definitely you need to be worried enough that it'll motivate you to study. Um, but because the final is cumulative, I understand it's a lot of information, and I am not as picky or as convoluted or as whatever you want to say. I don't ratchet up the difficulty as much when I'm thinking of my multiple choice questions. I try to have multiple choice questions that recognize that would be average difficulty for someone who studied the material the first time for the exams as they occurred in the course and were able to remember the big ideas from each chapter. And so, you know, some of the real excruciating detail gets discarded. Um, Again, only the new material that we've covered since chapter three. And that would be, of course, our a balance sheet and income statement. Those will have free response questions. They will also have some multiple choice questions. The old material will be multiple choice questions exclusively. What I break down here is each of the pieces that we've looked at. Chapters one and two was exam one. Um, Chapter seven was exam three, and chapters eight and nine was exam. I'm sorry, with cash and cash equivalents, accounts receivable was exam two, inventory was exam three, and this is the new material that will be on the final. Chapters one and two, exam one, there's not a whole lot there. I mean, there was at the time, right? But basically, we were just knocking out the framework that we used in the rest of the course. You definitely want to revisit expense recognition or matching, revenue recognition principle. Understand that cash and accrual accounting. What's the distinction between these two types of accounting? Um, what's cash versus accrual? What does that mean? Simple adjusting entries, definitely closing entries. Closing entries are just something we've always seen as an issue going forward in intermediate two and advanced. So I definitely like to put a couple of questions about closing entries on the exam. Unadjusted, adjusted, and post-closing trial balance properties. What does that mean? Well, basically, what's the distinction between these three trial balances? The second practice set really kind of the second practice set really made you tried to make you think about, okay, what transactions go into the unadjusted balance of this account? What adjustments are there for this account? That's kind of what I'm thinking of. In a post-closing balance, then you should know, well, a post-closing would just be the adjusted balance, but all of the income statement accounts are zeroed and the dividends are zeroed. All of those were put into retained earnings. That's the difference between an adjusted and a post-closing balance. And of course, the difference between unadjusted and adjusted is just that we have the adjusting entries made on the relevant accounts. So that's going to be a pretty small part, right? I wouldn't put a lot of time or effort into exam one material because it's only going to be 10 or 15%. An example of what I mean by um, not going as deep. So I'm going to pull up exam one. Oops, wrong way. I'm going to pull up our first exam from the summer. Do I Here it is. And skipping through the multiple choice. So most of these multiple choice questions are pretty fair game for the final. I didn't think the multiple choice from the first exam was that bad. But for example, this, I wouldn't spend a whole, I wouldn't really donate any multiple choice to this cash and accrual information problem. Um, Here, yeah, I could see me asking a single multiple choice question about errors that arise from failing to make an adjustment. Here, yeah, I might give you one of these adjustments to make, but I wouldn't have you do the whole thing. So, scaled down, pared back information. Do the old exams make good study material? For sure. Because if you can work those exams, oops, I just shared the same thing. If you can work those exams, then you can definitely work the questions on the final. Well, if I can stop doing that. I also want to talk about exam two now that we're in this mode. I'm going to pull up exam two and do the same idea behind it and just kind of say, what should you really focus in on? What might um, be things not to worry about? So for exam two, the bank rec problem. Not going to be obsessed with the bank rec problem. I would not. I might ask you like, if there are outstanding checks, what, how do I reconcile this? And the correct answer would be, I need to subtract that from the bank balance, right? Just little facts from bank recs, but not a whole problem. This guy, yes, definitely know how to do every piece of this problem. You should know how to account for sales, collections, um, write-offs, returns, all of that is fair game. So make sure that that you go through this, understand all the aspects of this accounts receivable problem. Notes receivable, I might have one question about how to accrue interest on a note. It wouldn't be a really difficult one. It would be something along the lines of what I gave you on this test. But I would only ask for one of these, not all three. Other than that, cash and cash equivalents, again, not a huge thing for you to understand in the final, a little too detailed. This question, very conceptual, very detailed, gross versus net method accounting would not be on your final. Um, but questions like this, yeah, this one, all three of those. Basically, gross versus net method. Would you debit this? Would you credit this? What would you credit accounts receivable for when they paid it off? Because they're using, in this case, the net method and how to adjust accounts receivable for bad debt. All of that's fair game. For the inventory chapter, let me pull that exam. All right. I feel like, most of the inventory multiple choice questions were not that difficult. All could be something I would look at. Remember, I won't directly replicate anything. If I asked you anything about purchase accounting, I would ask in a multiple choice question. This would be greatly simplified in terms of how I would ask it. this is the extra bonus opportunity. Remember that's due on by tomorrow by midnight. I forgot to include on the test the units sold. Huge, huge snafu on my part. Um, I wouldn't take it as deep. I probably would just give you price points without purchase returns and all that mess. And then, so I would simplify it by dropping all of that, dropping that, and then that's all the information you would get. So you wouldn't even need to worry about gross method, net method, paying in the discount terms. You would just get a simple purchase sales log. You get the number of units sold and the dates that they were sold at. And then you'd have to do LIFO perpetual or FIFO periodic and tell me what the cost of goods sold was. Um, it's not easy to test journal entries on multiple choice questions, so I tend not to. You should definitely know lower of cost or market, lower of cost or net realizable value. This is easy multiple choice calculation type of question for me to put out there. And the errors, maybe a basic error question, but I wouldn't have a second year error, and on the test, I gave this as bonus. But yeah, if you knew how to do the first year's error, then you should be fine for the final. So I do pull back um, in terms of what I expect, at least from, oh shoot. I closed it. So the person attending said that wasn't sure if I was showing anything. So just understand that I'm pulling back from some of the exams that don't want all the detail, know the bigger pieces of it. Definitely go back and look at those exams, make sure you can work those problems. If you need extra problems, then those exams, my oh weird. My advice would be to go to study problems that mimic those exams as well. In terms of the balance sheet and the income statement, of course, as you saw on the structure, the final exam structure, what is going on here? Oh, okay. The new material is definitely the most, 45 to 55%. So I would spend the majority of your time really making sure you nail those. I gave you examples of what the free response questions are going to be. Frankly, they don't change a whole lot in format from the study problems I have. So if you cover the chapter 3 and chapter 4 study problems, like work if two or three of those problems from chapter 3 and then have watched the videos and work through some of the chapter 4 study problems, it should not be a surprise to you what you see on that portion of the exam. The multiple choice for those two chapters are really going to go in line with knowing the purpose of the financial statement, maybe some questions about balance sheet ratios. Um, things like EPS calculation. Um, what else was there in there? EPS calculation, um, discontinued operations. Those also make easy calculation questions for multiple choice. So be ready for those. But overall, really, what I find is that most students end up replacing one of their low exam scores with their score on the final. I would say over half of the students tend to have a final grade, a grade on the final that is greater than a grade they made on a past exam. And so that results in the final exam counting on its own at a good grade, and then replacing your low exam test grade for an overall bonus to your grade. And like I said, about half the students tend to do that. So take that for what it is. Make sure you are ready for it, but don't stress out about it ad nauseum because I do find my finals to be a bit more approachable than my individual exams, as long as you're prepared for it. All right.